Welcome back to Poorly Educated Today in the News, where the world is on fire. The government is arguing with itself like cousins fighting over the last biscuit at Thanksgiving. And the price of gas is starting to look like a phone number. Now, I don't know if it's just me, but when every headline sounds like the beginning of a disaster movie, you start to wonder if somebody spilled coffee on the timeline, and now we stuck living in the director's cut. We got wars popping off, markets twitching like a raccoon on espresso, and politicians acting like duct tape counts as a long-term strategy. So grab a cup of whatever you can still afford, because today's news feels like somebody tried to juggle chainsaws while riding a unicycle made of policy failures. Segment 1. Government shutdown musical chairs. Meanwhile, here at home, the federal government is partially shut down again, which is becoming such a tradition, it might as well have its own holiday. The Department of Homeland Security funding fight has lawmakers arguing over immigration enforcement rules, body cameras, masks, and accountability measures, which sounds like a heated debate but mostly looks like people yelling across a table while the clock runs out. Essential workers are still working without pay, which is the government's way of saying, "We appreciate your service so much, we're going to reward you with uncertainty and stress." Nothing boosts morale like protecting national security while checking your bank account, wondering if your paycheck got lost in the mail like a Netflix DVD from 2006. Now, politicians claim this shutdown is about principles, but it also conveniently overlaps with major workforce cuts across federal agencies, which feels a little bit like rearranging the furniture while the house is being repossessed. Elon Musk's Department of Government Efficiency is reportedly pushing layoffs across the civil service, which sounds efficient until you realize fewer workers usually means slower services, longer lines, and government websites that crash faster than a cheap lawn chair. The grounded observation here is that institutional instability makes it harder to respond to emergencies. And right now, we got plenty of emergencies competing for attention, like toddlers fighting over the same toy truck. Segment 2. Artificial intelligence becomes the boss. In technology news, artificial intelligence is moving beyond chatbots and into executive decision-making, because apparently humans looked at corporate management and thought, "You know what this needs? Fewer humans." Major companies are now developing AI systems that help CEOs make strategic decisions faster, which is great if you believe faster decisions are always better decisions. Nothing says confidence like letting an algorithm analyze spreadsheets and decide whether Karen from accounting still has a job. Now, I understand automation helps efficiency, but we used to worry about robots taking factory jobs. And now we got robots potentially replacing the people deciding where factories go. That feels like skipping a few steps in the plot. The grounded observation here is that AI is increasingly shaping economic outcomes, from hiring to logistics, which means its influence extends far beyond funny image generators and homework shortcuts. And if the machines start attending board meetings, I just hope somebody programs them to understand the importance of snacks, because no major decision in history was made on an empty stomach. Segment 3. Science moves faster than policy. Scientists have announced a major breakthrough in cancer treatment involving in vivo CAR T-cell therapy, which could make advanced treatments cheaper and more widely available. This is one of those stories that reminds you humanity is capable of incredible progress, even while the rest of the news looks like a bar fight between history books. The ability to engineer immune cells directly inside the body could reduce costs and improve outcomes, potentially transforming how we treat certain cancers. The analogy here is like upgrading from dial-up internet to high-speed broadband for medicine. Except instead of faster downloads, we're talking about saving lives. The grounded takeaway is that scientific progress often happens quietly while political headlines dominate attention. but these breakthroughs can have massive long-term impact on public health. It's comforting to know that while governments argue and markets panic, somewhere in a lab, somebody is still figuring out how to help people live longer, which is honestly the best kind of plot twist. Segment 4. China watches the distraction. While everybody's staring at the Middle East, China is making quiet moves in the Indo-Pacific, which is the geopolitical equivalent of someone slowly moving your furniture while you distracted watching TV. Reports show Chinese drones spoofing aircraft signals and testing airspace boundaries near Taiwan, which is a fancy way of saying they poking the fence to see if the dog still bites. Electronic warfare sounds complicated, but at its core, it's basically high-tech hide-and-seek with billion-dollar equipment and international consequences. The analogy here is like when somebody realizes the teacher is busy helping another student, so they test how far they can lean back in their chair without getting yelled at. Except instead of a chair, it's strategic airspace, and instead of detention, it's global instability. The grounded reality is that power vacuums tend to invite opportunistic behavior, and when the United States is heavily engaged in one major conflict, other countries sometimes explore their leverage. That's not new, but the technology involved now means these tests happen faster, quieter, and with more plausible deniability than ever before. Segment 5. Disasters don't wait their turn. Severe wildfires and extreme weather across the central United States show that nature doesn't check the news before causing problems. Nebraska experienced historic wildfires fueled by unusual heat and strong winds, proving once again that climate and weather patterns are becoming less predictable than a raccoon on roller skates. Firefighters managed to contain major blazes, but the scale of destruction highlights how environmental volatility is stacking problems on top of existing crises. At the same time, severe storm risks across the plains threaten tornadoes, hail, and damaging winds, meaning some communities are dealing with multiple threats at once. The analogy here is like trying to fix your roof while the basement floods and the power goes out, all while somebody keeps ringing the doorbell asking if you want to refinance. The grounded reality is that emergency response systems face increased pressure when disasters cluster together, which requires coordination, funding, and long-term planning that doesn't always fit neatly into political timelines. Segment 6. Strait of Hormuz and gas pump nightmares. The big story right now is the escalating conflict involving the United States, Israel, and Iran, which is causing global energy markets to act like they just saw a ghost driving a tractor. Oil prices have been bouncing around so fast that economists are getting motion sickness, and the Strait of Hormuz is suddenly more important than the last cold soda at a July barbecue. Experts are warning that supply disruptions are worse than the oil shocks of the 1970s, which is not exactly comforting considering those shocks gave America disco, inflation, and a deep emotional fear of long gas lines. Now the government says negotiations are ongoing, but Iran says negotiations are not ongoing, and the markets are reacting like a dog that hears thunder and runs into a wall. The International Energy Agency is talking about releasing emergency oil reserves, which sounds helpful until you realize that's basically the economic version of using the emergency ketchup packet you've been saving in your glove box since 2012. The grounded observation here is that energy prices ripple through everything from groceries to airline tickets. So when oil jumps, suddenly your trip to buy eggs feels like financing a yacht. And I gotta say, if geopolitics keeps messing with supply chains like this, we gonna start measuring inflation in units of how many chickens you gotta trade for a gallon of gas. In conclusion, the world right now feels like it's running every possible stress test at the same time, from geopolitical conflict and economic volatility to technological disruption and environmental extremes. The common thread through all of it is uncertainty, which markets hate, voters hate, and pretty much anyone with a grocery bill definitely hates. But history shows that periods of chaos often produce unexpected innovation and adaptation, even if the road getting there feels bumpier than a tractor tire filled with gravel. For now, the best we can do is stay informed, stay skeptical, and maybe keep a little extra patience handy, because the news cycle ain't slowing down anytime soon.